Let's make a little car bag. It can be used for trash or to hold snacks. Today I'm going to be working on a project from Hoop Studio, which is a company by Kimberbell, and it's on their Me Time Delivered website. And so they have lots of different subscriptions and boxes and lots of different projects. So today I'm working on the 2024 December project, and it is a car bag, which looks like it could be maybe a little trash bag or just something to keep things in the car kind of contained. And it comes with everything needed. So here's the leather for the bulk of the bag. And let's see. It has a little postcard that shows what is in the kit. So there's, of course, the instructions that they send, just like all of Kimberbell's instructions. And then it has a buckle. It has the vinyl, the webbing for the strap. That's cute. It's kind of a gold color. That's for the strap right here. And oh, the vinyl roll I think of must be this. This is clear vinyl, and I'm assuming that that gets ironed on to the inside so that it makes it a little bit water resistant. And then it has, of course, the fabric. That's really pretty. The different fabrics. It also includes the batting. That's great. So it has everything needed. It just looks like the lining. And this looks like wash away topping. Yep. So when we embroider on the leather, we will put this wash away topping on top. And of course, the embroidery files are on my sign-in page when I ordered this, so I can download that and put it onto USB. Cute. So let's get started on this cute little car bag. So I am going to be using regular no-show mesh. The only thing that doesn't come with this Hoop Studios kit is the stabilizer, and they are using the sticky back stabilizer, which is a stabilizer that you put into your hoop and then you would score around the inside of your hoop and peel off the paper, and the whole back of the stabilizer would be sticky. And then they are having us place the leather on top of that, and that will kind of hold the whole piece of leather down while it's being embroidered. I don't use that very often, and so I don't have any of that on hand. So I am going to use 2 layers of the no-show mesh. The other change I am going to make is, instead of using the vinyl that came with the kit that is iron on to make the lining piece water resistant, this is a lining piece, I have decided to use a product called PUL, and it is kind of a plasticky product that, for example, similar to like the inside of a diaper bag. It's water resistant. It's got a shiny side, and then on one side, and then on the back is more like a fabric. And so the shiny side that is water resistant will be the right side of the fabric. And so instead of putting, again, the vinyl on the lining fabric, I am going to use this as my lining. But other than that, everything will stay the same. So let's get started on this bag. I've opened Embroidery's Essential software, and I am going to bring the designs into the software and then send them to my machine. So I can use the merge stitch file icon, but an easier way is to just open the folder where I have all my files. Now there are two files that I need for this bag. I need the design and I need the centering crosshairs. So I am going to drag and drop the crosshairs first. Then I will drag and drop the embroidery file with the flowers, and those will be both centered in the hoop. Right now I have my 9 by 14 hoop. That's the last hoop that I used. So I am going to come up to the preferences folder and change to my 5 by 7. And then I will come up to this compass and select H, and that will enlarge the hoop into the design screen. That is the only thing I'm going to do with this file. I do want to note that you can send these designs or these files over separately and then just add them right at your machine. I am just choosing to do them together and send as one file. And normally I would put these on a USB. I do that probably 99% of the time. If I wanted to do that, I can come up to the file, save stitch file as. I would save this design and then I would add it to my USB and then take the USB to my machine. This time, however, I am going to just send it directly to my machine. So I will come up to Utility, down to Wi-Fi, and I am not going to choose to name or change this default name. I will hit OK. My machine is on, and it might take a few seconds to send this over to my machine. Once it's sent, it says file sent to the machine, so I will select OK. Now I can choose to save this file if I wanted them to be combined. I'm not going to do that. So when I close Embrilliance, it will ask me if I want to save. Again, if I save it, it would be saved with both steps. When I don't save, then I will just have to do those combining if I want to do this file again. I am not going to save. I also want to note that if you want to just send them separately to your machine, you don't need software at all. You would just select the crosshairs and save it to your USB. Select the embroidery design and send it to your USB directly. You don't need software to do that. But let's get over to the machine so we can stitch this out. So I am going to choose embroidery, and this time I will select Wi-Fi since I sent it wirelessly. And anything that I've sent over shows up, and here is the design that I just sent. So I will select and hit set. And I need to come up to the settings. The last hoop I used was my large 9 by 14. So I just need to change it to my 5 by 7 and select OK. I think I'm going to lower my speed just a little bit to do through this leather. Although I don't really think that's necessary, but it makes me feel better. I will select OK. And I'm just going to leave it centered, and I will choose embroidery. So now the first step is stitching out the crosshair so that we can align our piece of leather. I have a red thread. You need something that you can see. That's important when doing this and using the crosshairs. So let's get these stitched out. The first thing they want us to do is to add fray check to the ends of this webbing so that it has time to dry and it will be ready when we need to use it. So I just have some fray check, and I will just put a little bead on each end. and just set that aside. Now we need to get this leather prepared. We need to do some markings so that we can get it centered with the crosshairs. So the first thing we need to do is, of course, on the wrong side, it says to measure 6 inches from the short end towards the center. And then it says to find the midpoint of this line. And my leather measures 10 inches. So I will mark 5. And then I'm going to go down a little bit and mark another 5. And I don't need to come the whole entire 6 inches. I just need to make a little crosshair that will kind of match to line up with what we just stitched out. Before I try to line this up on my hoop, because I have 2 layers of the stabilizer, I think I'm going to darken my marks just a little bit so that I can see it through my stabilizer. And this won't be necessary, of course, if you are using the wash away and it doesn't, come through. So now what I need to do is I am going to turn this and kind of flip it to the right so that the excess and all of the leather is to my right, and I have the end that I've marked on my left. So I'm going to bring my hoop over, and I need to fold this in half along this short end, and I'm going to line that up with this line, and then I'm going to center the other line to this part. And again, this is where the sticky stabilizer would come in handy, because all of this would be sticky and then the whole piece of leather would be stuck down. I am going to work around it. I'm going to try. So now I have this extra piece. I'm going to hold this down and flip that over. And then I'm going to put a couple of pieces of tape, because the next thing that we need to do is flip this hoop over to make sure that those are lined up. So if I flip this over, and I'm not sure if you can see it, I can faintly see the black, and I think it looks pretty good. It's not exactly, but I am pretty close. So I am going to call that good. Again, if you use the stabilizer that they called for, you would be able to see that much more clearly. I think I'm going to add a couple of extra pieces. Again, since mine's not sticky. And then we can go and get this stitched out. And I want to emphasize again that when this is all folded out and ready to be put in your machine, that the excess leather is to the left of your machine. That's super important, or your design will be upside down. Now, the last thing we need to do before we stitch it is to find the piece of wash away topping, and that needs to be taped on the top. And I know that my design is centered, and if I even peel back, I can see that part of that mark is right here. And so I am going to place that right in the center and add a couple pieces of tape. So I have my hoop attached to my machine, and before I stitch out, I am going to double check that the wash away topping is going to cover the entire design. And so the way to do that is to come to this little box. It's a dashed line and it has a little arrow. If I select that, it gives me points of this design that I can check. So I am going to select this top left. My machine moves and this is the top left of the design. You can see where it is on the design and you can see that my needle is over my wash away topping. So then I'll come to this bottom left and it's still over the topping. I'll come to the bottom right. It is there. Now mine's folded under a little bit. And if you look at this design, actually, there's no stitching up there, so I'm fine. And I think even if there was, that's okay. Then I will go to the top right and I have wash away topping. So I know that I've centered my topping and that my design will fall under. So if you're ever wanting to make sure that your design is where you think it is, or just want to double check, you can use that little icon. So now I'll select OK. I will go to the minus plus needle and it's showing that it's on this step for the crosshairs. I've already run that, so I am going to use my down arrow. And so now I'm ready to stitch the first part of the design. I also wanted to show that this is a project that only gives kind of a generic name for the threads. So for this first one, it's going to be a dark pink, and I can kind of see, a pretty good stitch out. I am just going to choose threads that I have. I'm not worried that it won't look exactly like this. So I'll just find a dark pink and we'll start stitching this out. So here is all of the embroidery done, and for the embroidery topping, although it's wash away, you just rip, and I kind of rip towards the stitching, and I will just go through and rip this off. I will take tweezers and get it all off. I very rarely soak this. They tell you to soak this because one, you have the wash away on top, and then if you follow the directions, all of this stabilizer will be washed away. And the directions say to cut, around this and then soak it, because you'll have that sticky back wash away, inside of all like the leaves and everything. I don't have to worry about that. I'll just loosely cut around it. So I'll see how much I can get off of just pulling this top, and I'll probably take some tweezers, but if I can't get it all out, then I will go ahead and just mist it and get rid of the remaining of the wash away topping. So I have the wash away topping off, and if you watched it, this is kind of repelled the water. This is obviously a synthetic, and so it didn't make any sort of stains, so there was not an issue with that. I just cut the back stabilizer loosely around. I liked using this, so the only thing that I would do different, and I can see why they used the sticky back, is because I have a little bit of extra material right here. So if I were to do this again on something like leather, after this first one stitched out and it got ready to start stitching these leaves, I think were second, I definitely would have pulled a little bit more taut, so that, I mean, it's very little, but you can see a little bit, of extra material. So that's what I would do different. Although, again, I did like using the no-show mesh. So what I'm going to do is, this is an OESD pressing cloth, and I'm going to press it from the back. I am going to use a Teflon sheet. You could just use a regular pressing cloth. And I don't have it on the highest setting. I have it on right above synthetic, so maybe like the silk wool. And I'm just going to press this and just see if I can maybe press. I won't obviously completely press out, but I'm going to see if I can get that a little bit more smooth. And I think that looks good. All right, let's go finish this up. Now the rest of this project will be done on a regular sewing machine. Now that I have the embroidery finished, I need to cut all the fabric to size. I wanted to wait to cut the leather until it had the embroidery on it. So in the directions, the leather piece needs to be 9.5 by 24. If you remember, my piece of leather is 10 inches wide, so I will take off 1/4 of an inch on each side of the leather. The fabric for the cuff needs to be 7.5 by 9.5, and I need 2 pieces. And then the bag lining is 9.5 by 18. Remember, I am using this PUL fabric. I have a piece that I had for another project, and so you can tell it's about 11 inches wide, so I will cut this down. If you are using the fabric that came as the lining along with the iron-on vinyl, that needs to be put on, and that's simply putting this vinyl, peeling it off. It has a sticky back, spreading it over the entire piece of lining fabric, and then ironing down and making sure that it's ironed well and that it's super smooth. Then you would cut this to the size according to the directions. Again, I'm just going to use my PUL fabric, and I will save this in my Kimberbell stuff and use that for another project. So I'm going to get these cut to size. So the first thing I'm going to do for the fabric is, to make it easier to see, I just put right sides together. This is still one long piece with a fold. And I am going to just line up one edge with this bottom edge of the fabric with just a little tiny piece of the fold, and I'm going to cut that fold off, and that gives me a nice even edge. Then I'm going to flip this cut piece to my left because I am right-handed, and I need to measure 7.5 by 9.5. So I will line up the 9.5 inch with the cut that I just made and make sure that it's on the correct all the way up. And then I will mark this down to 7.5 so that I will just cut this little bit of excess off, and I'll have two pieces that are 7.5 by 9.5. I don't normally use the markings on my mat unless I'm doing something a little bit bigger. When I'm doing pieces that fit within my rulers, this is how I measure. I think it's a little bit more accurate. And you don't cut in the same spots on your mat all the time. So there I have two pieces for the cuff fabric that are 7.5 by 9.5. My leather is exactly 24 inches long, so I just need to trim the 1/4 inch off of the edge. And then my PUL, let's see how long it is. I know it's wide enough and it's plenty long. It's longer than, so I need to cut this to 18 inches and then 9.5 inches. Now that I have everything cut to size, I need to do a couple of markings. On the leather, I need to mark on the right side, and I need to mark each of the short ends 2.5 inches down from the top. And I will draw a line across the entire top. For the fabric, it's kind of an all over print, but I think it does look better one way. One way kind of looks like it's upside down and one way doesn't. So I am going to use this as the top. And so I will need to measure the bottom, because when this is stitched to the leather, if I mark a line here, this will eventually get flipped up. And so this first piece that I marked is the bottom. So I'll just do the same thing with this piece. If I like it this way, looking at it, then I need to mark this bottom edge. So I will just flip it up and mark this edge. Now these two lines that we drew need to be lined up and sewn. I think I'm going to press this fabric on the line so it will be easier for me to line up, and then we will stitch those together. So I have these fabric pieces folded and pressed over for the 1/2 inch, and now I need to line up this line with this fold. And so I am just going to put the fold right at that line, and I'm just going to clip down to hold that in place. And then I need to flip this up and tape. And then sew across where that fold is. And then I'll spin it around and do the other side. Now to get the webbing ready, we need to grab the webbing and the buckle. You need to hold the buckle right side up, and I am going to take the end of the webbing and put it up through this bottom section and over that next bar and down. And then the directions say to measure from this top bar right here, from that bar up to the edge of the webbing should measure 4 inches. So if I just line my ruler up with that bar, I just need to, from the bar to the top is 4 inches. Now I need to just fold this piece down, back. Then this long piece of webbing will just fold at the bottom and just fold up so that that little 4-inch piece is just right in the middle with the long folded around. So I need to clip that to hold it in place. So it looks like this. Now when we get ready to place the buckle, we need to make sure that we're placing it on the end that does not have the design. The design is over here on our very far right. So we need to mark this so we know exactly where to place the end of the strap. And so the width of the bag should measure 9.5 inches, which means that 4 3/4 is our center mark. So I'm just going to hold my pencil there. And then I am going to line up just any of the 1/2 inch marks. And I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch up from that center. So here's the center, and I need to mark a 1/2 inch up. Now I need to mark a 1/2 inch above the center that I just marked and a 1/2 inch below. So if I flip my ruler and just put any 1/2 inch mark right where I made that mark, I can go up a 1/2 inch and make a mark. Here's my mark, and then go down a 1/2 inch so that the two that I just marked, and it's kind of hard to see, is 1 inch apart. So I'm just going to draw a line. So you can see here is my center of my bag. I marked a 1/2 inch up from the seam, and then I marked a 1/2 inch above this dot and a 1/2 inch below, and that is an inch, and that is where our fold is going to line up with. And so in order to line this up, we need to flip the buckle down, right side down, and then line up this fold with the mark that we just made. That's an inch. That's an inch. And then we need to tape it. And this leather behind the cuff needs to remain up. We did not trim that. And so I'm going to go ahead and just clip that so this stays while I sew. And what I'm going to do is take it to my machine, and I'm just going to sew a square with an X in the middle to secure that. And remember, it's on the the edge or the side that does not have our design. Our design is way down at the other end. All right, let's go get that sewn. So now what we need to do is fold and clip this buckle and strap out of the way. We're going to be sewing the side seams, and we just want to make sure that, you know, this doesn't get anywhere near where we're going to sew. So you can just kind of loop it and put a couple of clips so that when we put right sides together, that will be in the middle and not close to our side seams. So when we put our right sides together, the most important to line up is going to be these seams. So just line them up and I will clip on both sides. Now I'm just going to sew the 1/2 inch along both sides. Now after sewing on the bottom fold, we just need to cut kind of a diagonal line to make this less bulky. Don't, of course, trim your stitching. I'm going to stay a little bit away from it, but I will just kind of do a diagonal cut just to kind of lessen that bulk. Now, right now, we're going to leave this bag right sides together, and it's time to work on the lining. For the lining, I am taking the shiny side of this PUL fabric, and I'm going to put that right sides together, and then I am just going to sew a 1/2 inch on each edge. So I have sewn the lining 1/2 inch seam allowance on each side, and then I also cut a little diagonal angle off the bottom fold. So I'm ready to turn the lining right side out, but I want you to know that the lining will only go up to the seam line where we added the cuff. It will not go up to the whole way, and so that might be a little bit deceiving. You might think that you cut it wrong, but that's the correct way. So I need to turn this right side out, and I'm going to kind of poke the corners out. And now I need to put the lining inside of the bag. And again, the lining, when I line it up to sew to the top of the cuff, only goes to right here. Again, don't be concerned. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to match the side seams up, and I'm going to have one seam going one way and another seam going the other way so that they kind of nest and all the bulk isn't in one area. Then I'll flip around to the other seam and line those seams up, and again flip one seam one way and one the other, doesn't matter what way. And then I will just clip or pin the top edge so I can sew. And this needs to have a gap of about 5 inches left open so that we can turn the bag. So what I'm going to do is sew maybe a little over an inch from each of the seams and then leave this open. So I'll start here, go around and stop right after the other seam. So I have the cuff fabric down, and you just have to watch out not to, sew over another part. I am just going to start down at this clip, go around, and then I will stop at this clip, leaving this whole section, it's about 5 inches open. So now I need, through this opening that we left, I need to turn this bag right side out. So I'll just grab onto the bottom and just work to get this all out. Now I am going to reach in and kind of work at getting these corners out. And I'll use a turning tool to poke them out. Just be careful not to use something so sharp that it cuts through. So now, before I turn the lining to the inside, I need to close this opening. Now the directions say to go ahead and hand stitch this, but I am not going to do that. I am just going to kind of pull where I started and stopped stitching, and it will automatically just fold in. And so I am going to just put those folds together and clip. And I am just going to sew a very small or very thin top stitch right along that fold. This will go down inside the bag, and so I'm not concerned that it's not, going to be hand stitched. So I will sew just a super small top stitch. So here is the top stitch. You can see it's just super close, and it just seals up that opening. So now I need to just turn the lining towards the center. And you'll notice that when you do that, the lining will start all the way down. The cuff will come up and around and will basically end where our leather stopped. So that piece of leather that we did not trim, that will be the top. So right here you can see that it's thick. That's where the leather is. So the lining and part of the cuff will be of course, to the inside of the bag. So I hope that you can see how that goes down. And I am going to give this a press. We've been doing a lot of turning and scrunching, so it needs to be pressed. But you can see now what a cute bag. So the back of this strap, this will go up under the headrest and come over, and then will come up through that top bar. Of course, this will be around the seat, or the top of the seat. and come back up through the top, and then you just pull it as tight, you know, as you need, and so it hangs, and then that just opens to be the little bag. Now once I get this pressed out and all, you know, tucked in nicely, I will do one last top stitch between the leather and the cuff, and that will just hold everything in place so that this whole lining won't come out. So I gave it a little press, and when I pressed it, I just held it open and put my iron, you know, inside. And when I got to the back where the strap was, I just, you know, didn't really go over that. I just went to each side of it. So that pressed it, and then I was able to do the top stitching around the whole bag.